We are live on YouTube.
Mark?
Okay, Sarah normally starts. This is the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of June 8th. Chair Carroll,
Here.
Commissioner Bland,
Here.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Here.
Commissioner Chapin,
Here.
Commissioner Chen,
Yeah.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Oh, Sarah.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Here.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here. Great. Welcome everyone to the June 8th public hearing and public meeting. We will begin the day with a public hearing for applications for work on designated properties, and that will be followed by a public meeting for two applications that have already had a hearing and are returning today with revisions in response to the Commission's comments at the initial hearing. This hearing and meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube. If you'd like to watch the proceedings, please visit our YouTube channel to watch the live stream. And if you would like to testify on any of the hearing items, please join the meeting at the estimated time for that item as is shown on our agenda, which can be found on our website. And with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala.
Thanks, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. As mentioned, we'll start the Preservation Department agenda with public hearing items. The first is item 1, LPC 20-01817, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 184, Lot 11, 424 Atlantic Avenue in the Boerum Hill Historic District Extension. This is a transitional Greek Revival Italianate style row house built circa 1855, and the application is to construct a rear yard addition.
Good morning, Commissioners. The applicants have joined the hearing. Please note that staff will be walking through the components of the proposal, and the applicants are available for questions. And staff, you may begin.
Good morning, Commissioners. Melissa Doherty, Landmarks Preservationist. This is 424 Atlantic Avenue, which is located in the Boerum Hill Historic District. Sorry about that. This is 424 Atlantic Avenue, which is located in the Boerum Hill Historic District Extension. Its location within the district is shown here in yellow. A quarter of this block falls within the Boerum Hill Historic District Extension. Half of it falls within the Boerum Hill Historic District, and a quarter of it is not part of a designated district, as shown on this map here. And on the right, we also have an image of the front facade of the subject building. And as mentioned, this application is to construct a rear yard addition. This is a block plan showing the other existing rear yard additions present on this block, with the subject property outlined in yellow. As you can see, the existing rear yard additions range in height from 1 to 4 stories plus basement and vary in depth. And the proposed addition at the subject property will be 2 stories plus a basement, so 3 stories total in height and 12 feet in depth. Here we have some context photos showing the interior of this block and some of the other existing rear yard additions present there. And here we have some 3D renderings showing the existing block, which provides a better sense of the massing. Although the scale of the proposed rear yard addition surpasses the predominant existing scale of rear yard additions present on this block, there are multiple in the immediate context of this area of work that are full depth, such as the addition present just 2 houses away at 428 Atlantic Avenue, as well as the addition present at 416 Atlantic Avenue in the other direction. This addition will be modest in terms of depth and will maintain significantly more central green space by comparison. Here we have some streetscape photos of this row on Atlantic Avenue at the front for context, and some front facade images, including both historic and existing conditions. Here we have a sightline study showing views over the front facade and the lack of visibility from that point with some context photos. As confirmed by the block plan and these context photos, this addition will not be visible from any public thoroughfare. Here we have the existing and proposed rear facade elevation drawings with the two adjacent properties on either side shown here. And here we have a more close-up view of that rear facade elevation. As you can see, the proposed addition will be a total of 3 stories in height and will be fairly consistent with the existing rear facade in terms of materials, design, and even fenestration. And it will consist of plain brick masonry. This will also include a terrace on top at the 3rd floor, and the existing fire escapes present at the rear facade will be retained and reinstalled at the new addition. Here we have some more context photos showing the existing conditions at the rear of the subject property and at the 2 adjacent rear facades. And these are the existing and proposed building section drawings, which shows the addition's proposed massing in relation to the existing building, and also shows its proposed depth, which will be 12 feet in depth. Here we have the existing floor plans with an overlay of that proposed addition at the basement, 1st and 2nd floor. And finally, we have some renderings of the proposed, showing the proposed rear yard addition at several different angles and in detail within the context of the site. The applicant team is here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? I'd like to ask the applicants if there's anything they'd like to add at this time. Is it Mr. Palermo? Okay, I guess not at this time. Okay, so we might have more of a discussion after we take testimony. Why don't we move to public testimony? If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And we, as always, will start with anyone who signed up in advance. And I will turn it over to Lisa Kursavage. Is it Lisa? Are you doing the testimony today? Sorry.
I am, yes.
Okay, great. Lisa Kursavage, our Executive Director, to walk us through the testimony.
Okay, great. We had one person sign up, Celine Bankoff.
Come on, here we go. Good morning, Commissioners. Simeon Bankoff, Historic Districts Council. HDC finds that the rear yard addition should actually be 1 floor lower. A 2-story addition would better fit the context of the other existing rear yard additions of the shared garden core, such as the addition 2 buildings over, as well as those across the yard. We also questioned why the configuration of the addition exactly replicated the parlor floor next door to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see anybody else with their hand raised.
And Anthony, did we receive any additional written testimony?
No, but Brooklyn Community Board 2 approved the original application, which was broader in scope than the one being presented.
Right, as presented to the community board, it was actually a full height addition and a rooftop addition, and they supported that at the time. Okay, so I'd like to the applicant to have an opportunity to speak. Is that Mr. Palermo? Would you like to address the comments that we've heard? Melissa, is your applicant here?
Sorry, I wasn't able to see the panelists.
Mr. Palermo is present.
Okay, Mr. Palermo, we've heard testimony that the addition should be a story shorter. Would you like to respond to that? Talk about the nature of this block? Are you perhaps muted?
There is a call-in number that is not identified. Perhaps he's joined with 2 devices. I don't know if we want to try that, but
Okay, yeah, because I think there's no audio connected to the panelists. Okay, I'm going to let a number ending in 119 speak.
And Melissa, maybe in the meantime, you can email Mr. Palermo to kind of see what's happening.
Sure.
Okay,
I'll reach out to him now.
over that discussion to Julia Rata, who is the project architect
Okay, okay.
and has actually done the studies for landmarks that we presented to you. As far as the neighborhood, I think the axionometrics are a clear indicator of the various building extensions in the rear of the buildings on our block front. And you could see that ours is less to prior extensions. Can we roll back to that drawing?
We can't control the presentation.
Okay.
Melissa, you have control of the presentation still, so if you want to advance the slide.
So if we can go to the block plan, 3D block plan, Melissa.
It's not allowing me to, I don't think it's allowing me to move. Oh,
Oh, there we go.
So just use your arrow keys or the mouse, Melissa, to advance. You can go backwards from here. This is the testimony slide.
for some reason it's not.
It's not moving. Okay.
Okay, I'll just bring it to that slide then.
Yes. So the 3D block plan. So here, go ahead. There we go. Yes. So here, as we can see, as Melissa mentioned before, the extensions, if you look at the entire block, they go full height, full depth of the lot, even though they go only 2 stories. So in comparison, even though we have 3 stories as an addition, it seems much less in scale than in comparison to other rear extensions.
There is also an example in the lower left of an extension in the rear that is a combination of 3 and 2 stories towards the lower left of the drawing. So I believe if we analyzed all the examples of the extensions in the rear on the entire block, we're the minimum, we're the least of the extensions that are already in existence.
In terms of square footage, you think you'd be the smallest?
In terms of square footage and actual depth of
Yes.
extension.
Okay.
Both criteria.
And Atlantic Avenue, is this section of Atlantic Avenue a commercial section and commercially zoned, and which allows for full lot extensions, which I guess explains the variety that we see here. Okay, Commissioner Chapin has a question. Please go ahead. Just accept my request to unmute.
Yeah, I was just going to say the applicant might want to also refer to slide 3 because the testimony was referring to, the extensions on the other side of the backyard, but there are a couple of large ones near them too. But that I think that's what the HDC was talking about when they were talking about small extensions.
If I may speak, yes, on the opposite side of the block, the buildings facing Pacific Street, if you look at the lower left corner, it's labeled building number 56. This is an extension that goes all the way up to 3 stories and basement. The larger extension goes 2 stories and basement, which approximately matches our proposed extension. But in this case, it goes even past the 12 feet that we're proposing. So it's slightly larger than what we're proposing. And then besides that, you have 1 story and basement additions. So these are the best comparisons to what we're proposing.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? All right, not seeing any other questions. Commissioners, I'm starting to request to unmute all of you so we can make a motion to close the hearing and begin our discussion. Okay, and Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
I so motion.
Thank you. And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so we've seen as presented, this is a 3-story addition that is much less shallow than most of the other additions in the block, but taller than the predominant one. And it's in a block with a lot of variety, partly because these buildings face Atlantic Avenue and have a different character, more commercial nature and zoning, and partly because some of this block is outside of the district. So with that, we can begin our discussion. Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you like to start this one?
Yes, I think you just told the story, which is that there's variety in this backyard donut, and what's being proposed is not visible, and it is in fact shallower than some of the other extensions. So I think it's appropriate and approvable.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Holford Smith?
Yes, I agree with that. I think the building still retained its original form, which is still legible, and the addition, well, it is 3 stories tall. It seems the shallower depth, I think, makes it appropriate, also given the context of the sort of irregular extensions in the backyard. So I can find it appropriate.
Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I also can find it appropriate. I think in this context, it is, if it were a precedent, which it is not for anything in the block, I would regard it differently. But I think that given the position and that side and the extensions, it's a modest extension relatively. So I can approve it.
Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree. I think it's appropriate.
Commissioner Devonshire?
It's modest enough and appropriate.
Commissioner Chen?
Agree with all the commissioners.
Commissioner Bland?
Yes, we've all commented on the massing, but I want to also comment on the extraordinary modesty of the architectural. It really sort of just repeats what's there, which is most unusual in these sort of situations.
Yes.
So modest in all regards, so approvable.
Okay. Commissioner Lutfi?
Yes, am I muted? I just want to make sure. Okay, yeah. I agree with all of the commissioners, and I also want to note how modest this is. It's so unusual that somebody doing an addition just completely almost completely replicates what they have had before. And for that alone, I could approve it.
All right. Commissioner Jefferson?
I approve it. I agree with my fellow commissioners.
Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I think from every standard that we use, this is appropriate. It's modest. It's not visible. Its design is compatible. There's no issue here whatsoever for me.
All right. So I think we're all in agreement that this is appropriate in this context and on this particular building. So Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you read the motion?
Yes. In the matter of LPC 2001817, 424 Atlantic Avenue in the Boerum Hill Historic District Extension, a transitional Greek Revival Italianate style row house built in circa 1855, and the application is to construct a rear yard addition. I note the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Boerum Hill Historic District Extension, and that Atlantic Avenue is a commercial thoroughfare where full lot rear additions are allowed by zoning and rear yard conditions are varied. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed rear yard addition will not eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed work will not be visible from any public thoroughfare, that the proposed addition will be modest in terms of depth and will not diminish the central green space, that the presence of a 3-story addition will not overwhelm the building or detract from the special character of the block, given the building's location on the commercial side fronting Atlantic Avenue, which contains several deep 1-story rear yard additions and other larger commercial buildings, that the proposed addition will harmonize with the existing rear facade in terms of design, material, and fenestration, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building or district.
And Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you second that?
I second it.
Thank you. And Mark, are you calling the votes?
Yes. Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 11 in favor and 0 opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
The next item is hearing item number 2, LPC 21-08216, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 43, Lot 25, 70 Hudson Avenue in the Vinegar Hill Historic District. This is a Greek Revival style row house built circa 1828. The application is to install entrance infill, stairs, porches, and windows.
Commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. You can use your arrow keys to advance the slides. Please remember to unmute yourself and state your name for the record, and you may begin. If you could just please unmute yourself.
Vanessa, we cannot hear you. Please unmute yourself. I have to go back to the beginning and start over the presentation.
Is there someone else who can step in, perhaps the staff?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, great. So I have no controls on my screen, so I couldn't unmute myself. Thank you. If you can go to the first slide.
You have control of the presentation. So
oh, I do.
Just click on it. It was just the audio that was having issues, so you can continue.
Okay, let me. Apologies, I'm trying to get to. So the arrows are going the wrong way. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Vanessa Licea-Chuki. I'm here representing Dale Nichols. I'm presenting a scope of work for some modifications to 70 Hudson Avenue in Vinegar Hill, Brooklyn. There was a previously approved application for this work, docket number 086590, which had expired in 2014. The project was delayed due to schedule and budget, and the owner would like to proceed with completing the work. We are presenting to you today the front entry and the rear elevation with new porches and a window. We will be coordinating with LPC staff to make sure that the other previously approved work, which has already been completed, such as the new roof bulkhead and new storefront, are in compliance with LPC and the approved drawings. The designation report describes 70 Hudson Avenue as a Greek Revival style row house built circa 1828 to 41. You can see the 1938 tax photo here to the right. The center is the photo at time of designation, and to the left is the current photo of the building. The building is located at the intersection of Water Street and Hudson Avenue in the Vinegar Hill Historic District of Brooklyn. Here is a designation photo from 1977 with a corner view. A portion of the rear yard can be seen here, and I have more photos of that condition later. Here are current photos of the building. As a note, the red tarp shown and shed structure at the rear yard is temporary. They were installed recently by the first floor tenant, and this is not part of the final proposed design and will be removed. The designation report lists wood clapboard as the original existing facade material at time of designation. We are proposing to maintain this facade material as clapboard siding. This is a change from the previously approved application, which called for cedar shingles with a thatch paint finish. So now I'm going to go through the elevations. For context, the existing elevation is all the way to the left. The previously approved elevation is at the center, and the proposed elevation is all the way to the right. And there's revision clouds at the areas where the changes are. So for the Hudson Avenue elevation, clapboard siding is to remain and to be repainted to match the existing color. The residential entry will have bluestone treads over brick steps, a solid wood door with side lights and transom. There will be a trim piece added along the edge of the building to match the historic condition, and a globe light fixture at the entry alcove is being proposed. At the Water Street elevation, the only change that you can see here is that the clapboard siding will be remaining. If you look to the elevation all the way to the right, there were previously approved balconies that had the cedar shingles as a finish, and we are proposing to have clapboard to match the existing building. So that would be the cladding for the balconies. And at the balcony or at the rear yard elevation, on the right-hand side, you can see the current proposed. In the center is what was previously approved. But for the rear yard elevation, the porches are to be clad in clapboard to match the existing facade. The doors will be single doors versus the double door that you can see on the second floor. And then because the second double door was removed, there is a fixed window that was placed there. And at the first floor, the windows and doors at the first floor are currently there, and they're being used by a current commercial tenant. And so we are showing them as part of this proposed new scope of work to make sure that everything is in compliance. And here is a close-up of the Hudson Avenue residential entry. This is sort of the existing condition. The proposed enlarged elevation is at the front, is at the top center, with the previously approved at the bottom center. The only change is the facade material remaining as existing clapboard versus the cedar shingle, and the bluestone treads over brick steps to match the bluestone sidewalk. And then there's the globe light fixture at the entry alcove. And for reference, there's also a section of the entry alcove to show the relationship between the stairs and the entry. Thank you again for your time, and I'm free to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. And just while we're on this slide, I do have one question. I know you said the only change is the retaining the clapboard and the bluestone treads on the stairs, but in the two elevations, the doors seem to have a different relationship to the end of the building. And I'm wondering, is the door opening wider or than it was proposed last time?
The door opening is a few inches wider. No, actually, the door opening is correct. What happened is there was an edge condition that wasn't detailed correctly. And you can sort of see it here. So we had to make it a little bit more symmetrical.
Okay, so what was previously approved was not drawn correctly.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions, so why don't we move to public testimony? If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand, and we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance. And I'll turn it over to Lisa Krasavage to take us through it.
Great, thank you. We had one person sign up, Simeon Bankhouse. Good evening.
Good morning, Commissioners. Simeon Bankhoff, Historic Districts Council. This is a prominently sited property in a small historic district. HDC mainly supported the previously approved proposal to change the clapboard siding to a more historic single siding and is disappointed that was never implemented. More importantly, however, we find the current proposal for the rear facade and porches to be insufficiently detailed for a regulated historic building, especially one of this age. The rear porches will be very visible and appear quite clunky and ill-proportioned. What's going on with the posts? Are they unfinished 4x4 posts? The rear facade should ideally relate to the front. Currently, they are only united by what we hope is similar use of clapboard siding. This is an instance where correct detailing makes all the difference in the world. Finally, the previous proposal replaced the non-historic replacement windows on the rear facade with ones of more appropriate multi-pane configurations. That unfortunately does not seem to be part of this application. We also understand there's been a great deal of concern about the existing historic paving on this block in general and on this building in particular. The retention and treatment of historic sidewalk and paving materials has been a major issue for decades in Brooklyn's waterfront historic districts. HGC joins community residents in a heartfelt plea to the Landmarks Commission for better and more vigorous enforcement of preservation standards in this matter. The historic streets of the Brooklyn waterfront are a distinctive and character-defining feature of these adjacent neighborhoods and must be protected. It is tragic that the worst despoilers of these historic features are usually city agencies and licensed subcontractors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see an additional hand raised. Jeremy Woodall, bring you in now. Oh, there we go. Hey, Jeremy, you just need to unmute yourself to turn on your camera.
There we go. Thank you very much. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jeremy Woodoff. Today I'm speaking for myself, but I think that I'm also able to speak for my employer, the New York City Department of Design and Construction, which along with the Department of Transportation has been involved in the ongoing reconstruction of streets in the Dumbo and Vinegar Hill historic districts. And since the question of the sidewalk has been raised, I thought it would be worth my taking a minute to say a few words on this. I've been involved with this project for a number of years and have worked very closely with the staff of the commission, notably Carly Bond and more recently Caroline Passion. It has been the goal of this project to salvage and reinstall the vast majority of historic paving and other materials in these districts, and where those materials are missing, to replace them in kind. There are also instances in which safety and ADA requirements require that certain changes be made to the materials and to the designs, but we have endeavored to make those changes in ways that we think are sympathetic to both the historic design and materials of the sidewalks and streets. I believe that the effort to retain historic materials and to install new designs where necessary to be in character with the district is unprecedented for an infrastructure project in New York City. And in terms of the particular sidewalk in question, the photographs shown in the presentation appear to show an intact reinstalled bluestone sidewalk, although I haven't been to the site in person. But I wanted to say in particular that if there are issues with the sidewalk at this location or any other aspect of the street reconstruction work in these districts, the commission should be in contact with DDC, because it is our goal to do this work correctly. And so I just wanted to make sure that the commission was aware of that. Thank you very much, commissioners.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised.
All right, thank you. And Anthony, do we have any additional written testimony?
So Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommended approval as presented, and there's nothing else in addition to those who have spoken.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I'd like to turn back to the applicant now and see if you'd like to respond to the testimony, in particular, the choice of clapboard versus shingle, and then the fenestration pattern and detailing of the balconies at the rear. I think if the sidewalk is not part of this application, or if it is, I believe it's being following our rules, but if you are replacing the sidewalk, you could also address that as well.
Hello, can you see or hear me now? Hi. So the sidewalk, the city had done street work on the sidewalk, and then they had replaced in kind with bluestone. So there is sort of replaced bluestone right now. All of the side work other than at the specific entry has been done. That is the status of the sidewalk. Regarding the rear elevation and the fenestration, there was a question when we were reviewing it with staff that there was the 1/1 windows at the rear that are on the second and third floor that are they're at the bathroom, and they're not, they don't have multiple lights. And that was mainly the reason why we removed the 6/6 at the rear, mainly to have more of a consistent pattern. And those are them. And then the decision regarding the clapboard cladding, I do not have a plan here, but in the initial application review, these balconies do not extend out into the rear yard. They extend out, I think, less than, actually, I don't have the plan in front of me, so I don't want to give a number, but there was a big conversation about it not taking up as much space in the back, in the rear yard. So there was a coordinated a review on that distance. And I guess you can see it, if you go to the side elevation, you can see how the sort of the relationship between it and the sort of the property line of the adjacent building. I think there. So it's sort of less than half. I think it's like 40% or less from the sort of face of the building to the exterior, to the next sort of property line. And the idea behind the existing finish is the clapboard to match the existing right now. And you know, this project has been sort of under construction for a really long time. And the goal is to finish it. And I think just the idea of repairing and repainting the existing facade was the decision to help expedite completing this project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Just to clarify, you're not proposing to remove the corner boards, are you? Because you don't show them in either the existing or the proposed, but they're there. Or you could be proposing to do that and miter the siding, I guess. I just wanted to clarify.
I have to double check the details on that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, but the idea is actually to keep what you have and then add to it, right?
Yes. Yes, the idea is to keep what is there, and if there is a piece that is not in the correct condition, to sort of replace in kind and have it match what's existing.
It's clear. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? All right, I don't see any other questions. So commissioners, I'm going to start to unmute you or request to unmute you so that we can move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. So Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, hearing is closed. So this is a project that was approved and the permit has expired. It's partially complete. And the application is to extend the expiration date to allow the rest of the work to proceed and to make changes. So there's sort of three discrete areas: the retention of the existing clapboard and new clapboard on the balconies, and the bluestone treads on the stairs, and the adjustments to the door to relate to the existing conditions, and then the fenestration at the back, and of course the new detailing on the balcony now that it's supposed to be clapboard. So it's really the sort of those three areas, which is really two areas, I guess: the front entry area and the rear facade fenestration and balconies. So Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you like to start this one?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the clapboard. I think that given that it's the existing condition and they're looking to repair it, I can find it appropriate to maintain it. I think that they should maintain the corner trim boards that are there. I'm hoping that that was just an omission in the drawing, that they wouldn't be taking those off. The rear facade, I think that changing the windows from the 6/6 to 1/1 is not appropriate. I think they should remain 6/6. And I think perhaps the applicant could work with staff on the organization of the back windows. The one on the second, that window, fixed window on the second floor is very out of place, that sort of horizontal configuration. I think maybe they could work with staff on that. And I think I would recommend the multi-light even for the bathroom windows. And as for the porches, I mean, I agree. I think that they need to work on the details, which are very undeveloped here and hard to understand. But I think the clapboard is an odd choice to clad the porches. And I would think that something more open, like a wood picket, would be more appropriate. And the entry door, I mean, I think the proposed changes are an improvement. And I think, again, if they could just work with staff to make sure that they get the detailing right, because there is that corner trim that's coming down at the edge of the building, and just want to make sure that they've got it properly detailed and worked out. And I think that the bluestone treads on the entry steps are fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
I agree with all of what Commissioner Holford-Smith just said. And I think in general, the proposal is moving in the right direction. They just need to work with the staff on the details, particularly of the rear elevation, the fenestration, but also all of the other details, which I won't repeat, which Commissioner Holford-Smith went through.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree, as Ann had said.
All right, Commissioner Devonshire.
I agree with Ann as well.
Okay, Commissioner Chen.
To disagree with Ann.
Okay, Commissioner Bland.
Yes, Ann sets the pace. But I also want to emphasize the issue that she brought up, which is the railing, let's call it, around the balconies, which seem odd if it's going to, I mean, it's almost as if it's also a 19th century thing. And I think it should be separated visually so that it's clear that this is an addition.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
I agree, although I would like to note that when we, in our previously approved version, the railing on the porches, we approved a railing on the porches that were completely shingled, and the applicant basically did the same thing, except with clapboard. So I'm happy to go along with the fellow commissioners, but I think what was proposed was consistent, except for materiality with what was previously approved.
Okay, that is true. And, I think part of the reason we have expiration dates is it gives the commission the opportunity to revisit some of those thoughts. And I think lots of times we defer to the opinions, especially if it wasn't that long ago, of the commission. But sometimes there are adjustments that people think might make the project more appropriate. So
Mhm.
I guess that's where we are. Okay, Commissioner Jefferson
I agree with Commissioner Ann.
and Commissioner Gustafson,
Yep, I agree as well.
and Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Same here.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make the motions? You set the tone here.
Yes.
Great,
Be
thank
happy
you.
to. In the matter of LPC 21-08216, 70 Hudson Avenue in the Vinegar Hill Historic District, a Greek Revival style row house built circa 1828-41. The application is to install entrance infill, stairs, porches, and windows. I note that the style, scale, materials, and details of the building are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Vinegar Hill Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features. That while the original design of the Hudson Avenue entrance is unknown, and the proportions, materials, finishes, and composition of elements at the proposed entrance infill and surround will be in keeping with entrances historically found in houses of this age and style, that the steps will be simply designed, well scaled to the entrance, and in keeping with materials and finishes found at the base of the house and adjoining paving. That the presence of porches and new window and door openings at the rear facade will be compatible with the type and style of the house and will not detract from an existing design composition of elements. That the limited size of porches will help them remain a secondary presence, and that the doors of the rear facade will be simply designed and well scaled to the facade. However, I find that the details of the entrance infill and surround are not fully developed, that the clapboard porch railings will not recall the railings typically found at porches of Greek Revival houses or relate well to the style of the house, and that the orientation and proportions of the new window opening at the porch and the proposed fenestration pattern at the upper floor windows at the rear facade will not harmonize with the fenestration pattern throughout the remainder of the house. Therefore, I recommend that the details and proportions of the entrance infill and surround be further refined in consultation with staff, that wood picket railings be installed at the porches instead of clapboard siding, and that the orientation and proportions of the new window opening at the porch and the configuration of the upper floor windows at the rear facade be modified to be consistent with the house's fenestration pattern.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, and Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baran,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
11 in favor and 0 opposed, the motion passes.
So it's approved with those modifications. Please continue to work with the staff, and we'll move to the next item.
The next item is number 3, LPC 21-08498, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 142, Lot 14, 31 Harrison Street House, aka Jacob Ruckle House, individual landmark. This is a federal style row house built in 1828, and the application is to legalize the removal of shutters without LPC permits.
Morning, Commissioner. Could we just confirm that the architect is here?
The applicant, Patrick Plunkett, is not present right now.
Okay. Do you want me to go ahead and start or wait until he joins us? I've emailed him.
Please go ahead and start, Ms. Shiloh. We'll see if we can track you down.
Sounds good. Good morning, Commissioners. Michelle Shabrami of the Preservation staff. The application before you is for legalizing the removal of shutters from 31 Harrison Street, which is located between Greenwich and West Street, without a permit from the Commission. 31 Harrison is one of 9 federal-style townhouses that were located in an urban renewal area during the 1960s and 1970s and designated as individual landmarks in 1969. 3 of the townhouses were moved from Washington Street to Harrison Street in 1971. In the 1970s, shutters were added to 31 Harrison Street and other houses in the group. as you can see on this slide, and the houses were sold to private owners. The terms of the sale require that the buildings be restored and that changes are approved by the commission. The commissioner should note that the removal of shutters at 2 of the houses were legalized by the commission in 2009 and 2015. Please let me know if you have any questions if the architect isn't here.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, commissioners, any questions? So, these are buildings that were relocated as part of an urban renewal plan. When they were relocated, they did not feature shutters. In the 1975, shutters were added, and we've twice approved removal of shutters. Yes, Commissioner Gustafson, please go ahead.
Yeah, when we approved twice the removal of shutters, we were approving the removal of historic shutters.
No, they were installed on the building in the 70s.
They all were
Not this
installed.
building. So I'm talking about the other 2 that we approved. Those were also not original.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So just to follow up on that, Michelle, none of them had shutters when they were moved, right? The shutters were all added in the 1970s.
I believe so. So let me go to the last slide. Sorry. So this is a picture of the buildings historically. There are no shutters. And then this is a picture in this 1975 when they were added to the building.
To all of the buildings, or many of them. Okay.
Yes.
All I'm trying to get to is whether we actually did exactly the same thing previously. Yes, we did.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson. You just have to unmute.
Do we have any research on what the original shutters look like? Do we know authentically what they were?
I can't recall if they were louvered or paneled. Sarah, do you remember from when we looked at this previously?
No, but do we believe that the buildings originally did have shutters?
I seem to recall from the first time that we brought 27A before the commission that they were showing elevation drawings where the architect always drew federal style houses with louvers on them, but I can't recall the type.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have an authentic record of it at all, of what was originally there.
We do not.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Holford-Smith?
Yeah, I have a similar question as to whether there were shutters originally on the buildings prior to their being moved.
There were not shutters.
Yeah, but had they been originally on the building?
Could have been.
I think we don't have the.
We don't know.
We don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? All right, let's go to public testimony. And if there's anyone in the meeting who would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand. And I'll turn it over to Lisa to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. We had one person sign up, Mark Bench. I'll bring you in now.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. This is Mark Bench for the Victorian Society of New York. Founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual landmarks, interiors, and civic art. We found this proposal to legalize the removal of shutters confusing. The applicant has provided us with 2 undated historic photographs shown on the top of board 6. The photo in the upper right corner shows the front facade of 31 Harrison Street and the other buildings in this row. At that time, the ground floors of these buildings had been opened up to the street. There were no historic ground floor windows or window openings at any of these buildings. In the same photo, you can see the window openings on the second floor of 31 Harrison remained, but each window had been sealed with either sheet metal or painted plywood. There were no historic sash, shutters or pintles at 31 Harrison visible in this photo. In 1969, designation photo shows the ground floor had been rebuilt with 2 new window openings. Only one of the ground floor windows had shutters or pintles. The 3 second floor windows had both shutters and pintles. See attached designation photo respectfully submitted. Board 6 states the shutters were removed in 1984. The photo of the existing conditions showed that there were now no pintles in place, possibly accounted for by the apparent replacement of the sash and frames at this building. The applicant did not state when the violation was issued. With the evidence of the photos the applicant has provided, it appears that the shutters were added when the building was renovated to make it appear more historic, or perhaps they were intended as protection, as the buildings appeared to be still empty. We therefore question why the violation was issued and recommend that the removal be legalized. However, if there is evidence that the individual landmark had historic shutters and that the shutter installation was in fact a restoration, we recommend denial. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see anybody else with their hand raised.
All right, thank you. And Anthony, do we have any additional written testimony?
Manhattan Community Board want to recommend that approval as presented, and there is nothing else in addition to those who have already spoken.
Okay, thank you. All right, Michelle, I don't know if your applicant has joined yet.
We just got indication that he is joining now. He's not appeared in the attendee list, but we'll see if he does momentarily.
And if he does, maybe he can just address the chronology of the photos. And just to note for the record, the violation was issued, I believe, in 2008. Michelle, do you know if the, just in terms of the chronology, the other 2 houses that had removed the shutters, did we issue warning letters for all 3 properties at the same time, and are there other properties?
So there's one property that still has a violation outstanding in the row, and there was another building that had a violation that got staff level approval to reinstall new shutters, and then they had to sign off.
Okay. All right, do we see the applicant?
No, still not in the attendees list, so we may need to move on without him.
All right, so as I think what we can tell from the documentation that we have in our records, that when the buildings were moved to this location, they did not have shutters. It is unclear whether they did historically have shutters, but when they were moved here, and they didn't have shutters. And then in 1975, shutters were placed on many of the buildings. And that in 2008, we noticed that shutters had been removed. We issued warning letters to several of these properties, 2 of which have already been legalized by the commission. This is the 3rd one before us. A 4th one has a staff level approval to do new shutters, and a 5th one will remain open after this. So Commissioner Goldblum, did you have a question?
Just a follow-up question. The 1975 decision to put shutters on the buildings was generated by whom? And was, I assume, approved by LPC? And was there language in the resolution that indicated, it could give us a clue as to whether that was an appropriate thing to do, therefore give us some light on this?
Yeah. So Michelle, at the time that the shutters were added in 1975, was it part of what they believed to be a restoration? And was it that documented at the time, or was it just a sort of a assumption that there might have been shutters?
So it could have been an assumption. I believe it had to do with them finding the evidence of the hand-drawn elevation drawings that this architect did where he showed shutters. And then there was the regulatory document that was associated with the sale of the row houses, and it mentioned the shutters in that document.
Okay, but when the buildings were built, there wouldn't have been an architect, right? There would have been a builder and probably not architectural drawings.
I seem to recall something that was presented in the previous hearing, and again, that's going back like 13 years, but where they were showing an elevation drawing and saying that this architect would have put shutters on a federal style building.
I think that there's something not completely right about that memory, because I don't think there would have been a builder, and I don't know that there would have been architectural drawings in the 1820s or when these buildings were built.
Well, the shutters were mentioned in the regulatory document.
Okay, so we still don't know whether they were added as part of, because it was a documented restoration or because it was a restoration to what they believed might have been there.
Right.
Okay. And the findings from the two previous certificates of appropriateness don't give us a clue to that either?
No.
All right, Commissioner Bland.
All right. For those of us who are not expert in this moment of history, isn't it true that we might have had shutters or might not have had shutters on buildings of this type? It was sort of an individual choice back in the 1820s to have or not have shutters. Is that an accurate assumption on my part?
I think we have seen evidence in the federal buildings. There are about 450 or 500 federal buildings that are under our jurisdiction, and I think that we have seen evidence of it both ways. So that's in my experience. I think that we have seen buildings that didn't have shutters and some that did have shutters.
Never ever to second guess you, Sarah, but if Michael Devonshire could also,
yes,
I would like to hear his understanding of that.
Yes, please. Michael.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Fred.
On the spot, buddy.
Well, every pattern book that I have seen, including Asher Benjamin, that has elevation drawings of federal period buildings, they have shutters. And they typically have paneled shutters on the ground floor where people could actually break in. And so they had a stronger security presence, and they would be louvered on the upper stories. The missed opportunity here is that they could have recorded or not either shutter pintles on the exterior brick molds or screw holes, which is, when we did the examination of Skirmahorn Row, the pintles were gone, but you could still find screw holes, and in some places the actual screws with the eccentric heads on them. So I would say that more likely than not, these buildings had shutters originally. Like I said, though, the opportunity was gone when I presume the original brick molds were tossed when new windows went in. But does that answer your question, Fred?
It certainly does, and thank you for the detail answer.
I'm sorry to gasbag too much about it, but
no. But I would also suggest that we honor the layered history over time. I'm not sure this would be part of a layered history, the removal of shutters from federal buildings that might have initially had shutters. But I might find it that way. And so kind of either or can work in terms of my understanding of how I might vote on such a thing.
I'm more than mildly annoyed that the owners of these buildings just take it upon themselves to remove these things without getting in touch with the Landmarks Commission.
Right.
Obviously, they know that these things are landmarked. Yeah. So that takes it to a whole different place for me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So the applicant has joined now.
Hi. My apologies, I had some technical difficulties there. So I missed some of the early portion here.
I think much of our discussion and our questions have been, we understand that the shutters were not there when the houses were moved to this location and that they were added to these buildings in 1975. But I think our question is, were they added because there was documentation that the buildings originally had shutters? Or as a presumption?
Right. Actually, it's my understanding that there were no shutters on the buildings through the actually no evidence of there being shutters on this row house for the first 100 years or so of its existence in my research.
Patrick, if you just state your name for the record, please.
My name is Patrick Plunkett. I'm an architect, and I'm representing the client and working with Stephen Harris Architects on this project. So yeah, I could not find any evidence of that. In researching when they were installed in the 70s, when the row house was renovated and rehabbed, I found some articles published about the rehabilitation that didn't specifically mention the shutters or any history about the shutters. Yeah, so there's no evidence that I could find.
And we were just talking about how sometimes you can find physical evidence on original sashes or brick mold, or the trim around the windows, the brick mold. And I don't know if any of the buildings in these rows have what appear to be original sashes, and if you've had a chance to look at that.
I can't actually, I do recall seeing pintles, but not on this particular townhouse. It was on one of the townhouses that was relocated to this row house. It's not an original to the Harrison Street row house here. In fact, I think there's still pintles on the house, on the townhouse. I did not see any at 31.
All right, commissioners, any final questions for the applicant now that we have him before we move to our discussion? Yes, Commissioner Devonshire.
So the research that was done was all archival, no forensic research. No one looked at the brick molds or the casings to find out if there was evidence of previous pintles or the date of the extant pintles, correct?
I have to say that's correct. Other than just studying the photographs, I did not see any evidence. Yeah.
Were the shutters removed when you were enlisted to work with this client? Did you recommend removing the shutters?
No, the shutters were removed. My client mother was the original owner of the house, and now he's the owner of the house. And he recalls that the shutters were removed in 1984. Many years before we were involved, before I was involved, and he had suggested that there was a real maintenance problems with the shutters. There's sort of a wind tunnel effect on Harrison Street because of the bridge on the west of the townhouse that you don't see in these photographs. And they were just having problems with maintenance, is what he had said. So they've been removed for decades ago.
Every house that has shutters has a maintenance problem. It's essentially a piece of furniture that's hanging off the wall. It's mortise and tenon joinery, but that's the way it is. A client of ours, the Merchants House Museum, has had to restore their shutters 4 times in the amount of time that we've been working with them. That's the way it is.
Yeah. He had also mentioned
to restore them or to get rid of them, and
there was also, I guess there are also pigeons roosting in the top of the shutters. Yeah. So
pigeons roost on windowsills too, and you don't rip the windowsills out and throw them away.
Okay. All right, so I think we will move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. And commissioners, I'm requesting to unmute all of you. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed. So we have some gaps in information, but we know that, as we know the chronology, they were moved here and at that time didn't have shutters. In 1975, shutters were added to the buildings and since then have been removed. We've legalized the removal at 2 other properties. We've issued a permit to replace shutters at a 3rd one. And then there's 1 other outstanding property that has a violation for the removal of shutters. I think what we're missing is some physical evidence from the buildings that might tell us whether these buildings originally had shutters or not. But I think that it does seem that it was likely that this style and type of building had shutters. Nonetheless, the ones that were removed dated to 1975 and may or may not have been an exact replication. So the removal of, these 1975 shutters. And so let's go ahead and start our discussion. Commissioner Devonshire, would you like to start this one?
And if I can just jump in, Commissioner Devonshire first, I think, Commissioner, we should all just be mindful of, this is one of those situations where we have almost identical applications before us, and we have twice before legalized the removal of shutters, and I just think we should keep that in mind. This is literally an identical application to other ones where we have previously acted, so just to keep that in mind.
Could I also ask, when was the district designated, or?
Building, individual.
They were designated in
1969.
1969.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Lutfi has a question also.
This is a question for Mark. So Mark, this idea that Michael Devonshire raised of, looking at, potentially looking at this forensically. Let's say that happened and there was evidence that, there had been shutters there. Given the fact that we've already legalized the removal of shutters, I mean, how would that forensic information impact not only this project? I understand how it would impact this project, but how would it impact the legalization? Because if it's here, it would have been on all of the buildings.
Yeah, I think the way I would think about that is, I think, and unfortunately we don't have the findings for the previous ones in front of us, but because the shutters that were removed were not original, I think that was probably why the commission at the time, even if these kinds of houses may have typically had shutters, that the removal of sort of non-historic shutters was seen as not as being basically okay, and also why we approved at staff level the installation of shutters. So I would say that's probably the dynamic that was going on.
Right, not removing the original shutters.
Correct.
Maybe no conclusive evidence about whether the buildings had the shutters. And then finally, this maybe as Commissioner Bland discussed, there's sort of this layered history where because of the maintenance issues, these federal style buildings have had, more than 100 years, sometimes without shutters, even if they were built with them originally. And so to have a federal building without shutters may not be inappropriate.
Okay.
Or may be appropriate instead of 2 negatives. Okay.
So,
and we have one more question, Diana, go ahead.
Yeah, I have actually a 2-part question. One, I assume that in the individual landmark description from 1969 that the shutters were not explicitly mentioned. Number two, I assume that when the shutters were added in 1974, I guess it was, or five, that there was no, that was either a staff level approval or there was no thing to have to legalize putting on the shutters. So those are my two questions.
So Michelle, can you answer whether the designation report describes shutters having been removed? And there is a report from the time that we approved the changes in the 1970s. And I think that's, again, what Michelle is not that familiar with.
Yeah, so I can't confirm about the designation report.
I'll look it up.
I'm just going to take a quick look, but I would assume not, but I can't say for certain.
If I could jump in, I've skimmed several of these designation reports while this discussion's happened, and honestly, the reports don't go into great detail on specific features. They are from 1969 when the reports were all rather short. So there's no mention of shutters in any of the ones that I've seen, but I do see in a couple of them referencing that the owner architect, John McComb, had one or two of these houses, and there were drawing plates of the Historical Society that some of the other restorations were based off of. So that's probably the genesis of these, but just as a reminder, many of these were either completely reconstructed in terms of their front facade or at least the ground floor, which implies a lot of the original windows, if not all of them throughout, and things like hardware would not have been from the original period.
That's very helpful, Corey. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we can begin the discussion now. Commissioner Devonshire.
I'm sorry, what were we talking about?
So the removal of 1975 shutters.
There is much about this that makes me want to deny it. But that said, we have over the years with this group of buildings just blown it. There should have been forensics examination in the beginning. There wasn't. The addition of shutters in 1975 was probably some kind of a knee-jerk reaction to, oh, here comes the bicentennial. Let's pretty these buildings up for the bicentennial. And so they put some shutters on these things. If they had louvered shutters on the ground floor of federal buildings, there is a high level of bogosity about that was invented by whoever that architect was. So they were bogus to begin with. The fact that they may have accrued historic value after 30 years makes it a little more problematic in terms of removing them. But we're at a position where I feel like I have no choice but to say, okay.
Okay. Commissioner Chen.
Given the situation, I think that this is the third in a row. Given the consistency, I think in this case we had to approve it.
Okay, Commissioner Bland.
I want to thank everybody for a tutorial on federal shutters. I mean, I probably a lot of us are not as detailed, knowledgeable about it as we might have been, but now we are. So thank you for that. Also, I would never be able to vote for bogosity anything, so I can begin to comfortably say that since these shutters are not original, for sure they're not original, that their removal is acceptable, and that will also not complicate our former approvals of the removal. So I'm comfortable with accepting this application as appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi.
Okay, I am definitely, Michael, I was surprised you didn't vote for forensic research. And since you didn't.
It's too late, I think.
Yeah, it's gone. All the fabric was changed when they were moved.
I understand. So, I mean, and I agree. Unfortunately, it seems too late. So I think unfortunate, but acceptable the way it is. And Michael, I would also like to say, I'm going to use that word bogosity in the New York Times spelling bee.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
I love the idea of layered history, so I can approve that.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I guess I wish we had had this discussion when the last two applications on this same issue were considered. I agree with Michael Devonshire that, this is one of those situations that where I hate the illegality of doing this without approval. The mistake here is our fault and not the owner's fault. But it is sort of a moment for a lesson here. When we make these decisions, our mistakes are permanent. Forever right or forever wrong. I've said that before. I agree with Michael that we have to leave it as it is then. So.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
Feel the exact same way as John just described.
Okay. Commissioner Halford Smith?
I agree.
Commissioner Chapin?
Well, I don't feel regretful about approving this because these shutters, as Devonshire described, are not the appropriate shutters that should have been placed there. So if we had been reviewing this when the first shutters were removed or when they were placed, I mean, today, we would look back at it, or in 1984, we would have said, don't put these are not appropriate shutters. So they're not historic and they're also not the appropriate shutters. So I don't have any problem with authorizing the removal at this point. If perhaps at some point in time, something more appropriate could be placed on the buildings, but that's not what's before us. And I think this is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Very interesting conversation. The only thing I don't disagree, of course, with Michael and everyone else, but I think it would be probably worthwhile for the staff to go down there and maybe take some pictures and see if there is any evidence on any of these buildings of, holes in the brick or holes in the sashes, if there are any original sashes or anything at all, so that the recurrent use of the word assume in the conversation was something that we probably could address, so that when this comes to us again, we had a little bit more substance.
Yeah.
And if the answer is, as I would assume it is, many, if not all of the windows are new. B, much of the brick is new. Then it changes the situation, I think, a little bit. And the only way you could say you need to put the shutters in is if this sketch turned up that showed that these buildings were originally designed for this location or for the previous location where they were with shutters. I think that all these assumptions are not helping us in dealing with this row as an entity.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you, commissioners, for trying to sort through this with some of the gaps in our information. And I agree, Michael, we should try to understand it even better. But for now, I think we are in agreement that the removal of the 1975 shutters, which were not original and not necessarily the design that they would have been, is appropriate. So Commissioner Devonshire, would you go ahead and read the findings?
Sure.
I didn't check the background.
Sorry, Sarah.
That's okay.
In the matter of 31 Harrison Street, the 31 Harrison Street house, also known as the Jacob Ruckle House, an individual landmark, the application is to legalize the removal of shutters without landmarks preservation permits. I recommend approval, finding that the historic shutters were removed prior to the designation of the building as an individual landmark, if in fact they existed, that the removal of the modern replica shutters did not remove any historic fabric, that within the context of the neighboring individual landmarks, none of which retained exterior shutters, the lack of shutters does not detract from the historic character of the house or the adjacent landmarks.
Okay, and Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum. You're muted, I think. Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 11 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Approved. And we'll move to the next item now.
Next item is number 4, LPC 21-08861, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 672, Lot 1, 601 West 26th Street, the Starrett Lehigh Building individual landmark, also in the West Chelsea Historic District. This is an international style warehouse building with Art Deco style details designed by Russell G. and Walter M. Corey with Yasuo Matsui and Purdy and Henderson and built 1930 to 31. The application is to install ground floor infill and modify and install signage.
And Commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. We now have control of the presentation, and remember to state your name for the record when you may begin.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Just a minute. Okay, there we are. Great, thanks. Good morning, Commissioners and Chair Carroll. My name is Lakin Cole with Higgins Quaisbarth and Partners, and I'm joined this morning by my team, Ward Dennis with Higgins Quaisbarth, Richard Brennan with HLW Architects, and Eric Schlemus with RXR, the building owner. And as introduced, we're here to present 2 scopes of work at the base of the Starrett Lehigh building. The first part of the application is for modifications to storefront infill at the 12th Avenue facade of the building, and the second part is for new building signage at above the base of 12th Avenue and modified building signage around the main entrance on 26th Street. I'm sure you're all familiar with the building as we've had a number of applications before you, but I'll give a quick introduction again. Starrett Lehigh building is 1931 industrial style building designed by Russell and Walter Corey with Yasuo Matsui. It is an individual landmark designated 1986 and a contributing building to the West Chelsea Historic District. This is the building here pictured from 12th Avenue looking south. And this is the building's location within the historic district. It's a very large building spanning a full city block. It's bound between West 26th Street, West 27th Street, 11th Avenue to the east, and 12th Avenue to the west. Oh, sorry, a little ambitious there. This is an overall plan illustrating the scope of work. This area here is the area that we're proposing to modify storefronts at 12th Avenue. First, I want to give some foundational context to the proposal on 12th Avenue. The base of the building is governed by a storefront master plan, which was approved by the Commission in 2017. The master plan you can see identified on this page in the blue dashed lines and the purple lines closely tied to the building footprint. footprint. That master plan envisioned retail storefronts, cohesive design for retail storefronts across the base of the building. And that master plan, we are not proposing to change today. The owner is committed to it. And in fact, it has been installed across the majority of the east side of the building where there are currently retail tenants. So here on 26th Street, around to 11th Avenue and 27th Street. The master plan has not been built out to date along the west side of the building. And that's because this area is occupied by a long-term lease non-retail tenant, Verizon, and their operations are not compatible with storefront infill. Meanwhile, the owner still wants to improve the exterior appearance and existing conditions across the base of the building with a kind of cohesive design. So what we're proposing on 12th Avenue today is an interim storefront treatment, an overlay, so to speak, for the master plan. We have presented similar overlay proposals to the commission in the past. One approval that you may recall was a decorative louver treatment over the Con Ed vaults here at the 11th Avenue corner, where there were unsightly louvers as a temporary treatment until the storefront master plan could be installed. So this application for 12th Avenue is in the same vein. Again, we're not proposing to change the master plan, but to install an interim storefront while the space is tenanted with a non-retail use. Here is the location, is overall building elevation and the location of the 12th Avenue storefronts. It's at the north half of the building. Also, the second part of the application, which I'll get into in a little bit more detail later in the presentation, is building signage. We're proposing building signage above the center of the 12th Avenue base, as well as building signage at the marquee of the main entrance on 26th Street here, and to modify previously approved signage at the marquee adjacent to that entrance. Refocusing on 12th Avenue, this is an existing condition photo. The area of work is defined by this pier here to the north and this one here at the center. From north to south, the existing conditions are predominantly not historic in the northern portion. The first bay is partially infilled with storefronts and then partially open for a driveway and parking area. Here at the center are storefronts that date to about the mid-1980s. There was previously glazing at the base. There is an existing spandrel which obscures a beam and supports a mezzanine at the interior here behind. And then there are multi-light windows at the mezzanine, again, all dating to the mid-1980s. And then here at this bay, just south of the storefronts, there's recessed CMU infill that is not historic. And at the center, there is an egress stair faced in brick. And that condition is the one historic condition within this area of work. So as a reminder, historically, the base of the building operated for the Lehigh Valley Railroad and was a train terminal and warehouse where trains and trucks would enter the building and unload. In this plan, you can see focused on 12th Avenue, it operated the same as the rest of the building. One thing to note is this egress stair that was originally at the center of the building and remains. Here are historic photos from the 1930s. Again, that egress stair at the center of the area of work, and then there were historically open bays further to the north. Also on this side of the building, historically there were various iterations of signage above the ground floor. So signage is part of our application for the west side of this building, and just want to point out that detail for you here. These are designation photos from 1986. From 1986, the historic conditions roughly remain the same with open bays. You can see just north of that center egress bay, the masonry infill had been installed. And then we know from DOB drawings that shortly after simultaneous to designation, the existing storefronts were installed in the northern half. So again, a detailed look at the existing condition and these storefronts from the 1980s. I mentioned in the introduction that we're working around some existing tenant constraints in this proposed design, meanwhile trying to improve the overall appearance of this area of the building to the west side highway and parks. The interior tenant is Verizon. Behind these boxed out show windows is interior walls that confine their maintenance operations on the ground floor. And then the spandrel reflects an interior beam that's supporting a mezzanine where there's office space occupying that area of the floor plan. And again, these multi-light windows are not historic. So to not disturb the tenant in this proposed design by the building owner, we do need to maintain this mezzanine at the interior and some privacy at the ground floor. So you'll see that in our proposed design. Here are comparative elevations, existing, the master plan approved, and then our proposed modifications. Again, this is the mezzanine, structural mezzanine that we are seeking to maintain for the tenant's office operations on that floor. As you can see in elevation, that mezzanine structure cuts right through the center of what would have been a master plan storefront. So what we're proposing to do is to retain the mezzanine and that existing spandrel, paint it black, and install a master plan kind of inspired open glass and metal frame storefronts above and below that existing spandrel. And then here at the historic egress bay, we're proposing to retain that condition and as it is existing, but to reface it with new brick to match the building standard, and above the ground floor install illuminated building signage. A closer look here at the master plan elevation and the proposed elevation. In general, the master plan design was conceived in order to respect the historic large train and truck openings at the base of the building defined by these piers. And we are seeking to do so in the proposed modified design as well. Also in the master plan, we propose to infill the corner of this northernmost bay, which is currently partially open after the 1980s partial infill. And that is part of our current application today to install this interim storefront through to the 27th Street facade. Here's how that condition will look as it turns the corner on 27th Street. These are the existing conditions on 27th Street, open bays with a masonry wall where this area in front adjacent to the sidewalk is used for parking. We are not proposing any changes to the 27th Street elevation. What we are proposing to do is where you see straight through to 12th Avenue currently, that will be infilled with storefronts, and we propose to close the wall with a new masonry wall to match the existing. Here is a comparative existing and proposed ground floor plan, and you can see the proposed corner condition in better detail here. This is the partially open corner and where we're proposing to install a masonry wall to close out proposed storefronts along 12th Avenue. At the interior, the Verizon space is confined behind these existing interior walls, and those would remain in our proposed design. Because we are removing the CMU within this center bay and kind of opening up their operations to visibility, we propose to install a similar interior wall 2-foot setback from the show window in this bay, and then the egress bay will remain roughly the same, but faced in new brick to match the building standard. Here is a mezzanine plan showing you the existing mezzanine that we are seeking to retain in our proposed design. Here's a storefront section. A typical section's cut through a storefront window with the existing conditions and the existing mezzanine. This red dashed line is showing you in greater detail how it cuts through the approved master plan design and thus prohibits installing that design type at this time. And so we would retain that mezzanine and the corresponding exterior spandrel, again painted black, and new storefronts above and below. Other than the proportional difference here, the storefront infill would be the same as has been approved under the master plan, with the same detailing and recessed character from the exterior piers. Here's a section cut through the entrance. There is an existing deeply recessed entrance to the Verizon space. We propose to bring that entrance a little closer to the face of the building to be in line with what would have been a storefront master plan design entrance. Okay, and then here's a section cut through the egress bay. Again, the existing conditions will be remaining, but we'll be replacing the face brick that is painted with new brick to match the LPC approved building standard. And then beginning above the egress door, centralized illuminated signage would be installed above the ground floor. Here's a detail of that signage. It's a 3'10" letters set on a 6-inch underscore. The signage is aluminum framed with acrylic facing, and it has LED illumination behind to give it a halo glow. And it's set on an underscore. The attachment will be through the underscore attached into the building, and that's where we'll receive the lighting supply as well. And here's an overall rendering showing that proposed design. I want to point out, as you see, we were proposing to retain existing interior walls and install one new interior wall behind these new storefront windows at the ground floor. We're also now proposing to install historical imagery. That was a direct response to the community board asking us to enliven what we had previously proposed as white walls behind the glazing. And so this is what that will look like. And in terms of the signage, we have proposed signage at other areas of the building. And so the typology and general illumination of the signage is characteristic with what has been previously approved at other sides of the building. Moving on to 26th Street, we proposed under two different applications to the commission, marquee and associated signage. One application was for a marquee above the main entrance, which had numerals within the sides of the marquee. And then another application approved a marquee at a secondary market entrance with letter signage on top of that marquee. And here's another look from another vantage point. This is looking to the east on 26th Street of that letter signage on top of the market marquee. And you can't see in this view here, but the numbers on the side of the main entrance marquee. What we're proposing today is to swap the location of the market signage letters on top of the secondary entrance and move it to the top of the marquee over the main entrance. We think that that's a more appropriate location for building signage. It would say Starrett Lehigh building, and we're not proposing to change the dimensions of that signage, but just the location. And here's a rendering of what that would look like, moving the market letter signage over to the main entrance, stating Starrett Lehigh building, and then adding market to the sides of the marquee at that secondary entrance. These are two existing condition photos. The marquees have been installed. We're looking from the corner of 11th Avenue on the east down 26th Street. The view shed is looking towards the west. And we wanted to show you these photos just so you can get a scale of the approach of this building. It's a very large building and the entrance is located at the center of the block. And so the approach is very narrow, and for wayfinding, we have devised this design as most appropriate to have the market be identified in the sides of the canopy, and that for pedestrian level recognition, the letters for the building be installed on top of the main entrance canopy you can see here in the far distance. So just to clarify in elevations and sections, this on the left is the previously approved marquee and signage over the main entrance with no letters above, but just numerals at the sides of the marquee. We're proposing to retain those numerals and install letter signage on the marquee above. 2 feet is the height. 2 feet was the previously approved height for the market letter signage as well. And then omitting that letter signage on top of the secondary market canopy and installing the illuminated letters in the side instead. So collectively, we think that we're proposing signage at 3 sides of the building. We think that the proposed signage overall is well scaled to the entrances at which they mark. And also historically, the building did have signage on 3 sides. These photos on the left side of the screen are illustrating historic conditions on 11th Avenue and 12th Avenue with signage in the 1930s. On the 26th Street side of the building, historically or originally, and it remains, there is engraved letter signage at the upper level of the building, and at the base as the building was converted from open truck and freight terminal into commercial use, signage was being incorporated at the pedestrian level, although this signage example here dates to 1960s. And to round out, just summarize the scope to give you a sense of the 3 areas of signage that we're proposing for this comprehensive proposal. This is 26th Street with the main entrance and market. This is 11th Avenue, where we have previously approved LPC signage on an approved marquee there. And here we are back at 12th Avenue, where we're proposing new building signage above the ground floor and storefronts as well. So that will conclude my presentation, and I look forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you. Thank you for such a well laid out presentation. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson. Just accept my request to unmute, or just unmute.
On this facade, are you removing the pilaster by the stair? Or is the pilaster original to the building, or was it added? If you go on.
So this pier and the extent of this brick construction is original. The face brick, it has been painted. So what we're proposing to do is to replace that with new brick that we've had tested and sampled and matching the exterior of the rest of the building, so that it will be kind of recalling the original unpainted condition. But we're not proposing to remove any of the piers. All the existing piers will remain.
I'm just confused because in one of your drawings, I think it's page 12, I think it is, there is a column there, a pilaster that's existing, and it's gone.
That is existing here?
Yes.
Yes, so it is behind this brick and has always been behind the face of this brick. In one of the elevations, the master plan approved elevation, we proposed removing this brick infill and putting in storefronts, and we were going to be exposing and restoring this pier, or bringing this pier to the front with that storefront design. But as we're leaving the historic and existing condition in place, that condition would be remain brick, and that pier remains behind the face of the brick.
So just to be clear, in the master plan, that pier was removed.
In the master plan, that pier was reconstructed, or rather the brick was removed. The brick is currently the pier is behind this corner of the brick, and the brick was removed, so that pier was exposed.
Okay.
And then there were storefronts in between, but because we're essentially retaining the existing condition, we don't propose at this time to expose that pier.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and so just to be clear, so the brick is the original condition and it always covered the pilaster, and the master plan allowed for the removal of the original brick to expose the pilaster and do a storefront, but that work is not happening as part of this plan.
At this time, correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right, other questions? Okay, why don't we move to public testimony, and we might have more questions after that. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I'll turn it over to Lisa to take us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you. Nobody signed up to speak on this item, and I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I don't think we have anybody speaking to this item.
Okay, thank you. And Anthony, did we receive any written testimony?
So Manhattan Community Board 4 approved the application, and we do not have any other testimony.
Right, and as Lakin suggested, they suggested that something be put behind the windows.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I guess unless there are any other questions or final comments by the applicant, I think we can move to our discussion. Okay, Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed, and we'll begin our discussion. And so there are two sides that this application addresses, two sides of the building. One is on 12th Avenue, where they're proposing an interim plan to adjust the master plan storefront design to accommodate existing interior conditions with an interior mezzanine and walls. And so they are expressing this mezzanine with the spandrel, or concealing the mezzanine with the spandrel on the outside, and installing historic imagery in front of the walls to enliven the storefront space. But I think otherwise the configuration is very similar to the master plan. As originally and historically, and as originally approved, there was signage on three sides of the building. So the proposal is for signage on 12th Avenue that would be similar to signage approved on 11th Avenue. And 26th Street, the application is to switch previously approved signage on top of one approved marquee to the other marquee, and to change out the signage on the side. So two facades and sort of two components of work. One is storefront infill and one is related to signage. So Commissioner Bland, would you like to begin this one?
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, a very comprehensive and articulate presentation. Thank you for that, as we have come to expect from this firm. I think all of this is updated in a way that doesn't go back necessarily to the, to the 30s, which I think is fine. I think this building is being used in a different way, but thank goodness it's being used, and so prominently being used. It's a robust and quite fabulous building there on the Lower West Side. So I think the changes that have been suggested to the master plan are appropriate, given the condition that they find themselves in terms of tenants. I think the graphic design, the large scale graphic design, is appropriate to the large scale of the building, and that the lighting, the halo lighting that's been suggested, LED lighting, is also appropriate. So I think it's all together a fine suggestion.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah, I agree with Fred. I think overall this is very well done. It respects the original architectural integrity of the building. The signage works well in terms of size and scale, and the sans serif type on the side is very consistent with what has been there historically. I think the change on 36th Street makes sense, and the new signage on 12th Avenue looks great, as does the historic imagery at the street level, and it serves a couple of purposes. It works well for the existing tenant. It helps animate the street. It addresses concerns of the community. All in all, I think this is really a wonderful job.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I think this, am I?
Yes, you're on.
Yeah, carefully done job and very well thought through, and I can approve it.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
I agree with my fellow commissioners. I would highlight that this owner they are terrific stewards of this building. This, I believe, in my 7 or 8 years, is the 5th time they've been back here, and every single time what they presented to us is completely sympathetic with the building, and they're all improvements. So this is really to be commended.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
I'm in agreement. This is really well done.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
I agree. I think this will be a great improvement to 12th Avenue, which is becoming much more of a used street now. So it'd be great to clean it up like this. And I think the signage is perfectly fine.
Okay, great. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, my initial reaction was that the storefronts looked a little squat, but I see what the applicant explained carefully what the reason for that is, and I think this is a good solution for the current situation in tenant. So I can approve this.
Okay, and Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree. It's appropriate.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Respectful and appropriate.
Commissioner Chen.
Agree with all the commissioners, especially Commissioner Gustafson.
Okay, great. Terrific. Thank you. All right. And why don't Commissioner Bland, I think are you in the office? I don't know if you're able to open the motions now that you're in the office today.
Sorry.
That's okay. I can do it.
No, I can probably figure this out though. You're chiding me to get my IT help in place. I haven't read a motion in 14 or 15 months. It's about time.
Well, I'm happy to do this one.
Thank you.
Okay. In the matter of docket number 21-08861, 601 West 26th Street, the Starrett Lehigh Building, an individual landmark in the West Chelsea Historic District, an international style warehouse building with Art Deco style details designed by Russell G. and Walter M. Corey with Yaso Matsui and Purdy and Henderson, and built in 1930 to 31. This is an application to install ground floor infill and modify and install signage. And I recommend approval, finding that the work will not damage or conceal any significant architectural features, that the proposed infill at the west facade and northwest corner will help unify the base and remove unsympathetic modern infill without precluding the future full implementation of the master plan, that the proposed infill featuring single light display windows, low metal bulkheads, and metal spandrels will match the infill previously approved under the master plan in terms of placement, materials, details, and finish. that the change in configuration of the proposed infill to include glass transoms above the metal spandrel will not be seen in conjunction with infill conforming to the master plan, and therefore the change will not draw undue attention to itself, that the proposed concrete block wall will match the existing masonry at the recessed bays on the north facade in terms of material and finish, and will be in keeping with the industrial character of the building. That the proposed brick infill and simple metal door at the utilitarian stair bay will be in keeping with the historic treatment of this bay. That the proposed wall set behind the glazing of the proposed infill will feature printed historic photos of the Starrett Lehigh building, thereby enlivening this narrow space. That the proposed individual internally illuminated letters at the west facade will be installed at plain masonry and on a plain metal rail, and will be harmonious with the signage approved throughout the base of this building in terms of its size, material, and color. And that the proposed individual internally illuminated letters at the sides of the easternmost marquee and at the top of the central marquee are in keeping with other signage on the building and will not detract from the historic signage or the architectural features of the building or streetscape. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi, Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 11 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Next item is number 5, LPC 21-07876, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1241, Lot 6, 263 West 93rd Street in the Riverside West End Historic District. This is a Renaissance Revival style row house designed by Alexander M. Welch and built in 1897. And the application is to replace windows.
And commissioners, the applicants have joined. Please note that staff will be walking you through the components of the presentation with the applicants available for questions afterwards. And staff, you may begin.
Good morning, commissioners. Michelle Carrere and preservation staff. There we go. So as Corey mentioned, this application is for work at 263 West 93rd Street, which is the center of a row of 3 Renaissance Revival style row houses located on the north side of West 93rd Street between Broadway and West End Avenue in the Riverside West End Historic District. The application is to replace the 2 windows at the second floor of the front facades shown here with windows that do not match the historic operation. Here you can see the designation photo on the left, as well as the 1940s tax photo on the right. The photo on the far left shows the window open, demonstrating the operation of the sash as a single hung, with the stained glass window acting as a fixed upper sash. The stained glass windows are being retained. Here are some additional context photos of the existing windows. The matching building at 265 West 93rd Street had its windows replaced prior to designation of the historic district. The remaining windows at the facade of 263 have already been approved for replacement by the commission. The proposed replacement windows will be brown painted aluminum clad awning windows, which will match the finish and material of the windows throughout the rest of the facade. And here you can see the details of the existing and proposed windows in section with a detail of the vertical section on the right, the proposed vertical section on the right. And then lastly, the existing and proposed horizontal sections shown side by side. The applicant, who's also the owner of the house, is here to add some additional context and answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Okay. The owner like to speak now? Is there anything you wanted to add at this time? Okay, well, I'm looking for the owner here. Is it Ms. Baddeley?
Mr. Baddeley, yes.
Oh, Mr. Baddeley, thank you. Please go ahead. You just have to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Good morning. Well, I think Michelle made a very good presentation. I'm available for any question that you may have. I don't think there's any further to add, but if there's any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So let's see if we have any public testimony. If you're here and would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand. And we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance and get to others. So I will now turn it over to Lisa Kersavage to take us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you. We have 3 people sign up. I'm going to start with Sean Corsandi. Sean, I've brought you in, but you have to accept being, there you go.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee appreciates the applicant's effort to maintain this landmark. Retaining and restoring the decorative transom and surrounding brick mold while integrating the original millwork surrounds on the interior are all laudable efforts. As a rule, we're slow to adopt awning and hopper window replacements where there was never originally that as their function. In this instance, the owner has demonstrated care in their use of the awning window will more closely match the original appearance than the variant double hung parlor windows seen at row house neighbors 261 and 265. Although hesitant, as a replacement in kind would be most favorable, the Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee does support this C of A for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'll bring in Simeon Bankhoff.
Good morning, Commissioners. Simeon Bankhoff, Executive Director of the Historic Districts Council. HDC commends the applicant and their designer for choosing the right type of replacement windows for this project and retaining decorative transoms. Good job.
Okay, thank you. Next on the sign-up list, Mark Bench, who will be followed by Michelle Parker.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon. This is Mark Bench on behalf of the Victorian Society in New York. The Victorian Society opposes the application to replace these windows and alter their method of operation. We believe awning windows have no historic precedent on buildings of this age and type. In the past few weeks, we've seen the Commission approve construction of a tower in a district of small, low-scale buildings, the demolition of 2 early, important historic and restorable brownstone row houses because historic fabric had been removed from their facades. And now we learn that the Commission had previously approved the replacement of all the historic windows on this facade. From the photos provided, it appears these wood windows are original and in excellent condition. By what historic preservation standards would their replacement be found appropriate? Commissioners, we urge you to deny this proposal to destroy well-preserved historic material. Let us be reminded that the Commission's mandate is preservation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And finally, we have Michelle Parker.
Good morning, Commissioners. Michelle Parker, co-chair of the Preservation Committee at CB7. The full board voted to approve this application by a vote of 40-2 to 1 to 0. We found that the use of awning windows, that preserve the relative dimensions of existing windows and to conform to customary materials and appearance of front facade windows found elsewhere in the area is appropriate to the character of the historic district. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised.
Thank you. And Anthony, do we have any written testimony?
There is nothing in addition to those who have already spoken.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Mr. Badali, would you like to respond to the comments? I know 3 of the speakers were in support and commended you for your attention to the details, but we did get one speaker who opposed it, finding that with questions about the condition of the existing windows and sort of why one would need to replace it first, and then why you would replace it with a different operation. So maybe if you could answer those 2 questions.
Sure. Yes. Good morning. The windows are in decent condition, but they are quite drafty, and 21st century lifestyle does require windows that can preserve the energy consumption of a building. And also, I like to mention that all the rest of the windows in the building are already approved, and we actually just received them to be replaced. So replacing these 2 windows will actually make the entire facade of the front of the building more in harmony than not. I have tried very hard to choose a window that is as close to the look of the building as it can possibly be, the historical look. The glass area is going to be within 1% of what it was. I did look into other types of window that may be available. We did look into casement window. We also looked into in-swing casement, and we also looked into tilt and turn window, all of which may have been more appropriate than an awning window in some people's opinion, but all of those windows require a jamb that would be much thicker than this awning window. We also looked into hopper window, which the maximum height of this size jamb was 59.5 inch, which was much bigger, much smaller than this window. So any other type of window would require far a smaller glass and a much bigger frame, which would not be as close to the historical look of the window that I have chosen. So that's really, I also want to mention that we have provided full central air conditioning for the property, which also brings in fresh air through mechanical means. So we really don't expect this window to be open. So to me, it was most important to have the look that is as closely possibly to the historical look as it can from outside. And I do sympathize with the fact that the operation is not, maybe the best choice for a historical building, but I think overall the compromise will make the building look at its best.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, I am going to then get us going to close the hearing. And Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Sorry, any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so just to note a couple of things to provide some context for the discussion. The commission's rules that allow for staff level window replacement do not require a condition statement unless the window is determined to be a special window by virtue of its age. So for example, the original multi-light window on a federal style building, or by virtue of its craftsmanship and configuration. So more than 12 lights in a pane, or stained glass, or curved glass. So that is why the staff has issued a permit for the replacement of the other windows on the facade. This one is before us because the one aspect of the rules that it doesn't meet is the match in operation. It otherwise matches the number of panes. It's a single pane, and the details and profiles. So it's the change in operation that we are looking at. And also to provide some more context, the commission has approved the change in operation for large single hung windows or pivot windows to another operation with the same configuration. So a pivot to casement or in swing or hopper. So and also it's not that dissimilar from the passive house windows we've approved, where we've approved a double hung window that matches the details of the historic double hung window but tilts in. In this case, the awning window will tilt out. So with that as some context, why don't we go ahead and begin our discussion? Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
Yes. This, I think the system operation changing versus the aesthetic and the proportion, I think it works well. I can approve this.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is appropriate. I do want to state my appreciation for the fact that they didn't take this as an opportunity to remove the stained glass in the transoms. I also want to highlight that I think the applicant had an articulate and direct and excellent response to the testimony.
Yeah, thank you. Agree. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yes, I also want to commend the applicant for having, gone through a real education about the types of windows and making an argument that is, I think, very convincing for his selection, but also his understanding of what it is that we consider. So I very much appreciate it. And I think that, that the applicant is right. Because we get these thin rails here, that is the sort of the preferable outcome, and the operation, despite the fact that it's changed, I think is appropriate and acceptable.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
I think that the change in operation is appropriate. So I don't believe that it will be visible, but I do lament the loss of the original windows, which do look like they are in good condition. And my first preference would be for them to weather strip the original windows and keep them in place, but I can find this appropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin.
I think it's appropriate given the location. I'm glad that they're preserving the stained glass portion, and I think that the applicant, well explained their needs, and I think it's fine.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Thank you. I echo Ann's concerns about the removal of the historic windows. I think that the proposed windows are perfectly appropriate, but I think that we should be the first recourse should be to keep historic material. I think in this case, I would vote with others to approve it, but I think it's it should not be, the reason for replacing a window should not be just to kind of want an insulated window. Studies have shown that the added insulation value of new windows is relatively modest in its impact on the energy performance of a house relative to the insulation of the windows, relative to other factors. So I will vote with the majority, but I think it's something that we should consider looking at more stringently in the future.
Commissioner Devonshire?
I agree with Michael and Ann's statements. The energy performance when there is a thermal upgrading of original windows is always better than new windows, but I will vote with the majority.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Likewise, yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Bland?
I certainly note the dissenting opinion, even though I think they've said they'll vote with the majority, which I presume will win the day. But, you know, as one who lived with 100-year-old windows in my 110-year-old house, maybe the energy efficiency in a calculation, which I never did, of course, or never would even understand how to do exactly. All I can say is that my family and I were incredibly uncomfortable in these leaky windows. They were double hungs. We replaced them. They look the same from the outside as they did in 1902. And we've been very comfortable ever since. So I cannot really consign the idea that people should have to live behind very leaky windows that frost over every time it got too cold, et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, I think it's an interesting conversation, and it will always exist and should always exist when we talk about windows like this, but I'm in support of this application and in general, window replacement when the occupants are terribly uncomfortable behind those existing windows. But careful, very careful replacement so it's that the exterior look is pretty much the same, even if the operation is not.
Right. And the exterior look being the same
Yes.
retains the character and style of the building.
Exactly. Thank you.
Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I want to, I want to thank the applicant for a very thoughtful and conscientious and thorough approach to thinking about and ultimately, you know, coming to us to replace these windows. And I think that the applicant's done a terrific job. I applaud the fact that the stained glass decorative transom is going to remain. The fact that the materiality and the finish of the window are going to be the same. I think it's going to be in terms of the way the window opens, it's not even going to be perceptible. And all in all, the facade of the building will look very cohesive. And I'm also an advocate for energy efficiency. I have to say, having just recently replaced all of my windows, and also right now dealing with an HVAC breakdown today and for the past couple of days in my apartment. So I can definitely and wholeheartedly approve this.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think we are poised to approve this. Commissioner Jefferson, would you be able to make the motion?
Sure.
Great.
In the matter of LPC 21-07876-263 West 93rd Street, Riverside, West End Historic District. Application is to replace windows. I recommend approval that the work will not damage or destroy any significant features and that the stained glass transom will be retained, that the proposed window will match the material and finish of the other windows at this facade, that the proposed change in operations from single hung to one would only be perceptible when the windows are open, that the second floor windows at the two adjacent buildings have been replaced with double hung windows. Therefore, the change in operation at this house would not diminish the unity of the row, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historical character of the streetscape or the historic district.
Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 11 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Right, that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item. Yes,
Next item is hearing item number 6, LPC 21-07454, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1145, Lot 41, 120 West 74th Street in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. A Queen Anne Romanesque Revival style row house with Moorish elements designed by Tom and Wilson, built in 1886 to 87. The application is to amend Certificate of Appropriateness 19-8641 to modify the proposed rear yard addition.
And before we begin, Commissioner Devonshire, did you want to add something to the last discussion or have a question? Okay, I thought I saw your hand up. Okay. All right.
Okay,
So, go ahead.
the applicants have joined, so please just state your name for the record and unmute yourself.
Frederick Becker.
Darling.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that. My name is Frank Nigro, and I'm here representing the owners of 120 West 74th Street. And before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the commissioners for approving our switchback handicapped accessible ramp to the building last year, which was worked out quite well. Thank you. So we're here today. We currently have a certificate of appropriateness for a 4-story stucco clad extension in the rear of the building, which was a modification of the previously approved certificate of appropriateness for the building issued in 2017. So our desire is to extend the top floor to take full advantage of the move the set, to push the building to the back of the building, giving us full floor on the top floor. As it stands, we have 1-bedroom apartments on the lower floors and only a studio apartment in the rear of the building. And we're also proposing a slight enlargement to the storage room to make it a sunroom with some windows where someone could stand in inclement weather. So since we're talking about the back of the buildings, this is our block and lot. And you can see this in this particular block, there is a hodgepodge of 2, 3, 4, and even 5-story extensions to this building, all of differing heights, materials, and colors. So as you can see from this photograph of the rear yards, there are 5-story extensions. There are 4, 3, 2. Some of them are deeper, some of them are shorter. Our particular building is located here, and we will be coming flush with the, under our current extension, will be flush with the extensions of the adjoining buildings. As you can see, there's a great variety of parapet and roof conditions here. And So as you can better see here, there are double height parapets. Some have parapets, some have no parapets, some have railings, some have no railings. It's quite a hodgepodge of items in the rear yard. So our proposal would most closely match this configuration. So again, all of the buildings on either side of our property are brick clad for the most part. Our proposal, the original elevation obviously was in brick. Our current approval allows for this 4-story stucco clad extension. And we are proposing that if we are permitted to extend the top floor, the owners would go to the extra effort and expense of cladding the entire extension in brick. And at the suggestion of the community board, we would add stone sills and lintels to the building, which we believe is a better use of the rear yardscape than having this stucco box sticking out from the property. So with your indulgence, we would respectfully request that we be allowed to extend the top floor of the building so that we can indeed have the studio become a 1-bedroom apartment, which also fulfills our client's desire to leave, to give one apartment to each of their children in the future. So I thank you for your.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, let's see if we have public testimony, and then we may have questions after that. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand, and I will turn it over to Lisa to take us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you. We're going to start with Sean Sandy.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee supported this applicant's accessibility efforts and even suggested improvements for constructability and structural integrity to their interventions in April of 2020. We questioned their need to raise the parapet and destroy original corbelling and stone lintels in October of 2016. While we can appreciate the applicant's interest in additional space for a modest rental unit, from a Landmark standpoint, the original fabric is being entirely obliterated. Landmark West holds firm in the long-standing tradition of maintaining top-level, punched openings on rear facades. The application today breaks any remaining vestige of continuity with the row. The cited precedents predate the online permit database and possibly the district designation itself. But regardless, note that while items addresses 140 to 144 are specifically called out for rising to the roof, they are shouldered dogleg extensions, not full width, full height for their respective landmarks. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee can support the switch to brick for the rear facade and the return of the stone lintels that are being removed under the prior C of A for the windows for approval. But we do not support the full width rear yard extension for a full height of this landmark. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next, Michelle Parker.
Thank you again, Commissioners, and good afternoon. Michelle Parker for Community Board 7. Our full board approved this application by a vote of 34-4 to 0-0. We are really happy they're going to use the red brick instead of the stucco. And we appreciate their agreement to include the lintels similar to the original condition on the rear of the building. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Sammy Bancroft.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Simeon Bankoff, Executive Director of the Historic Districts Council. HDC observed that the full height rear yard extensions within this garden core are not full width. This seems to be a case of metastasizing expansion, which is transforming a row house into a de facto apartment building. In our original 2016 testimony, HDC drew attention to the then existing brick corbelling on the cornice line of the original rear facade, a common architectural feature, but a characteristic one which was retained in the original approval. This feature would be erased by this proposal. Additionally, the proportions of the proposed windows are inconsistent with the rest of the row. This proposal piles bulk on bulk until the original building is completely lost. We urge the LPC to reject it.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see anybody else signed in.
Okay, thank you. And Anthony, did we receive any additional written testimony?
There is nothing in addition to those who have already spoken.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Nigro or anyone else from the team, would you like to address the comments or respond to any of the comments about?
Well, I would just like to say that the original application, which was filed in 2016, was done by a previous owner who gutted the building and then abandoned the project. We were, however, allowed to take advantage of the 4-story extension. So that will be built in one way or the other. We would obviously prefer to do it in brick and have the opportunity to expand the top floor per the owner's desires.
Okay.
I mean, we've worked closely with the Landmarks team and tried to address everyone's concern as much as possible. But as you can see from the photos, the rear yard is really quite hodgepodge of railings, parapets, bulkheads, no parapets at all. So we think that having a rear facade of brick is preferable to having a 4-story stucco extension to the building.
Okay, and just while we have this photo on, in your row, you have a couple of buildings that have a projecting bay at the top floor that
Yes,
maybe
they
starts
do.
all the way down at the ground and extends up to the top floor. And I assume that those, as well as the other buildings in your building, all feature corbelled brick cornices or corbelled brick at the top.
Quite frankly, I cannot tell you because I don't know that we have any photographs of that. Let me see something.
Okay. Or,
can I zoom this in? Is there a way to zoom in?
This photo might work. But you do have a as was mentioned in the testimony, there's corbelled brick at the top of your building.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Okay. All right. And this is a good photo because you can actually see the other buildings in the row that have the full height projecting bay at the back. And there was testimony about the fenestration pattern not relating.
Well, I'm sorry, don't mean
Yeah.
to interrupt.
So I was just thinking about with the bay, you'd have the 3-bay pattern. And I don't know if you've explored looking at that as a model.
It doesn't really work for our purposes. And as far as the windows are concerned, those we inherited from the prior approval. We could not change those and keep our prior approval. We would be certainly willing to work with the Landmark staff to, if they think that the windows might want to be replaced or modified in some manner.
Well, I think this comes from, many times when the commission looks at rear yard additions, as was stated in the testimony by the commission likes to see the top floor be the place where fabric is retained, and also a relationship to the rest of the row can be read at that top floor, and we're more flexible on the lower floors. So again, the fenestration pattern at the top floor is a place where that continuity can be read. And because you have some projecting bays in your row, that's why I wondered if that had been used as a model, that might help to connect it to the rest of the row. Okay. Commissioners, any final questions? Let's see. Oh, yes, Commissioner Shamir Barron, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think you may have said it, but building number 128, that has a full width and 4-story extension on it, but it is not the full height of that building. Is that correct?
Let me double check.
I'm looking at the plan. I'm just wondering if I've got that right. 128.
This one.
Anyway, it looks like, from what I can tell, that is the only building on that side.
This one.
Or at all, that is the full width extension, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And not full height of the building, but the height of what you are proposing, which is 4 stories.
Well, we currently have approval for the 4 stories. We are requesting the 5th story, yes.
Okay, other final questions? Okay, not seeing any. I think we'll move to our discussion. Commissioner Devonshire, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. The hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And we have a building that has an approval for a 4-story rear yard addition, and they are requesting a full height addition and providing context images of the context that show a varied set of conditions. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Well, I honestly, I don't see any reason to vary from our usual standard, which is to say, we preserve the massing of the building by preserving that top floor. Well, I see the variation here, but I don't see a justification.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
I'm in agreement. The top floor in its configuration of 3 bays and not built out should be retained.
Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree with that.
Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I also agree. Perhaps at some point we ought to take a deeper dive into the issue of how to preserve the look of rows, which could be more complicated, but I think that this is appropriate in this case to preserve the upper floor.
Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree, and I would encourage the applicant, since they're here anyway, that we approve this with the exception of the extension up to the top floor, so that they can use the brick and stone as they have shown it, that they don't feel compelled to revert to the stucco, and that we encourage them to work with staff on the fenestration anyway. Otherwise, I think that I agree with what everyone else has said.
Okay, thank you. And I think that the change to a brick material with the stone lintels and sills and even refining the fenestration could all be a staff level amendment to the original approval anyway. Commissioner Devonshire?
Good, to let them revert to brick. That's good. I think it needs to stay at 4 stories.
Commissioner Chen?
I agree with all the comments, especially the 2 Michaels.
Commissioner Bland?
Yeah, stays the 4, but let's allow the brick as opposed to stucco, but staff level.
Commissioner Lutfi?
I completely agree.
Okay, great. All right, so we are not supportive of a fifth story addition here. And so we would, we're not going to take an action on the proposal as presented today. And we would encourage you to continue to work with the staff to revise the existing approved addition to allow you to do the brick and stone lintels. And you can even explore the fenestration pattern to fit within the context. All right, thank you. So please continue to work with the staff.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll move to the last item before lunch, item number 7, LPC 21-07559, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1380, Lot 69, 4 East 66th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. A neo-Italian Renaissance style apartment building designed by J.E.R. Carpenter and built in 1919 to 20. The application is to create and modify window openings and install balconies.
And the applicants have joined the hearing. Please note that staff will be walking through the components of the proposal with the applicants available for questions. And staff, you may begin.
And also please note that Commissioner Devonshire is recused on this.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Richard Lowry, LPC staff. I will be presenting the application, and the architects Peter Panoyer and Jennifer Jurakaris of Peter Panoyer Architects are here to answer any questions. The property is located on the southeast corner of 5th Avenue and East 66th Street, opposite Central Park, and adjacent to a smaller chapel, which provides vantage points for viewing the areas of work. The scope of the work is to replace windows and to create and modify window openings at the secondary facades at the courtyard and these secondary visible facades here, and to install Juliet balconies. So this is the proposed plan of the openings. So removing one opening here and here and creating 2 additional openings, enlarging openings along this facade, creating new openings here, and modifying and enlarging a window opening here. The matter requires a public hearing because of the proposed modified openings and balconies that the visible secondary facades do not retain the same general shape and pattern as existing windows on the same facade. The interior courtyard, the applicants would like to enlarge and modify the existing window openings and install black painted single and paired multi-light metal doors and windows, wood windows with limestone tinted cast stone balconies with cast iron and gold leaf railings, matching the design of the balconies and doors at the floor above on the 9th floor, which were previously approved by the commission. Some of these openings and balconies at the south and west courtyard facades will be visible over the chapel from 5th Avenue, as seen here. At the south secondary facade, new proposed window opening here and a new bay. There are 2 infilled openings at the top 2 floors, which they're basing the size and shape on. At the south and west secondary facades, a proposed new opening and double window based on the size and shape of a window at the 10th floor is proposed. And then at this bay of 2 separate window openings, they're proposing to remove masonry infill, enlarge the opening, and install a triple window. Here are the drawings of the proposed architectural bronze French doors and the limestone tinted cast iron balconies with the cast iron railings. And here are the drawings of the proposed multi-light double hung black painted wood windows, which will match the historic window material, finish, configuration, and design. Thank you very much. And Peter Penoyer and Jennifer Jericaris are here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions at this time. Let's see if we have public testimony. If you're in the meeting, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Lisa to take us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you. I see one person with their hands raised from the Upper East Side.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Laura Variali, representing Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Chair Carroll and Honorable Commissioners. The Upper East Side Historic District Designation Report notes that J.E. Edwin R. Carpenter was one of the most noted architects of the many apartment buildings erected in New York City during the 1920s. Adding that the architect had greatly influenced the character of the historic district, and especially Fifth and Park Avenues as they developed in the 1920s. 4 East 66th Street is one of the many luxurious and carefully detailed apartment buildings with elegant and muted details. It is most unfortunate that today this building contains a hodgepodge of different window styles, both on its primary and secondary facades. 4 East 66th Street would greatly benefit from the establishment of a window master plan in order to provide a cohesive and historically accurate guidance on future window alterations. Friends appreciates the applicant's effort to restore the multi-light aspect of the windows on the 8th floor, and we are not opposed to the expansion and creation of additional window openings on the secondary facades of this building. Nevertheless, Friends Preservation Committee takes issue with the highly detailed and heavy-looking Juliet balconies proposed. Despite being previously approved by this commission in 2009 on a different floor, the proposed design is not compatible with Carpenter's style, especially considering the fact that he did design minimally detailed oval-shaped balconies on this building that can be seen on the 3rd floor of the 5th Avenue facade. Therefore, there is no historical precedent for the proposed design, a design that clashes with the architect's original intent and design. Given its high visibility, the secondary facade is highly prominent and should be given the same treatment and scrutiny when it comes to alteration as the primary facade. We kindly ask the applicant to work with the commission to come up with a design that is more appropriate to a Carpenter's building. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see anybody else with their hand raised.
Thank you. And Anthony, do we have any written testimony?
Manhattan Community Board 8 recommended approval of the application as presented. Other than that, we do not have any other testimony.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to turn to the applicants and ask if you'd like to respond to the testimony.
Yes, thank you. I would like to note that we are following a previously approved fenestration, and that while the railings may not have been exactly what Carpenter would have designed, we feel they're appropriate in relation to these, to the French doors. We also have noticed and observed and recorded that only the west-facing ones on the right, on the lower, are actually visible from the public way, from Fifth Avenue, the most distant point. And that I also just want to note that the disposition of those openings follows the pattern of many of the floors below, which are hard to document because of all the scaffolding. We do think that in the balance, these are, while unusual, present themselves to a very unusual part of Fifth Avenue where the low-set chapel with its screen wall gives a kind of sort of subset of architectural character to this essentially what was a courtyard and what would have been a courtyard in a typical building block. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, I'm starting to request to unmute all of you so we can move to close the hearing. All right, and Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And I think the presentation clearly shows these facades, the west and other return facades. And I think west and south is what we're looking at. And show the visibility and the relationship to the existing fenestration. So many of these are not visible and many also do relate to similarly sized window openings elsewhere on the facade, but some do not. So why don't we begin the discussion? Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think that in general it's approvable. I think that it will, fit in nicely with the building. Most of the changes that they're proposing, they're on the courtyard side and not highly visible. However, I do think that the triple window looks really odd and would be distracting. And I don't think that the triple window should be there, that there should be just the two windows, I think at that point. But I mean, the original, in effect, configuration. But otherwise, I could approve the rest of the proposal.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree with Diana. We generally try to preserve secondary facade window patterns where they are highly visible. We've done so before in similar situations. So I think that apart from the triple that faces west, that the application is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire? Oh, sorry, he's recused. Excuse me.
He's recused.
Commissioner Chen, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the comments by Diane and Michael.
Commissioner Bland?
I'm okay with the application as submitted. I think Peter Penoyer's eye and discerning sense of proportions can rule, in my judgment, right here, right now. I may be in the minority, however.
Okay. Commissioner Lutfi?
I agree back to Commissioner Chapin that overall this is fine except for the triple windows.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with the commissioners. I think the triple window is a problem, but I also think this building requires a master plan because 20 years from now, there's going to be other changes and, the architect is not going to be there. So, when does it stop being a hodgepodge? When do we start adding things to it? So I can pass it now, but
we can encourage the building to think about a master plan. Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I agree with the majority of the commissioners. The effort here should be to unmuddle the arrangement of the windows and the triple window, regardless of who decided it was a good idea, is simply remodeling.
Commissioner Shamir Barron?
I think I can approve the proposal as it's presented.
Okay. Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree with the majority that the bulk of it is approvable, but I agree that the triple window should be the two windows as it currently exists. And I encourage the building to develop a master plan for future.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So I think that while some commissioners are comfortable with the triple window because it's outside proportions and the sash proportions have a relationship on the facade, the majority of commissioners really believes that the two window pattern should be retained. So we'll make a motion to approve this application with that modification. Commissioner Chapin, can you read the motion?
Sure, thank you. In the matter of a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Manhattan, LPC 21-07559, 4 East 66th Street, Upper East Side Historic District, a neo-Italian Renaissance style apartment building designed by J.E.R. Carpenter and built in 1920. Application is to create and modify window openings and install balconies. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features or special windows, that the proposed doors and balconies at the courtyard will closely match those previously approved by the Commission immediately above at the 9th floor. That only 2 of the proposed doors and balconies at the courtyard will closely, that the proposed, that only 2 of the proposed doors and balconies will be visible from a public thoroughfare, that new windows on the visible secondary facades will be seen within the context of other altered window openings, that the installation of single and paired window assemblies is in keeping with the size and position of other openings found on these secondary facades, that the proposed windows will match the historic windows in terms of details, operation, and configuration, and that the work will not detract from significant architectural features of the building or the historic district. However, I find that the proposed triple window at the visible secondary west facade does not follow the predominant fenestration pattern of 2 separate punched window openings found in bays above. Therefore, I recommend that the triple window assembly be eliminated and the size and pattern of the modified windows in these bays match the windows above.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Commissioner Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor, none opposed, and 1 recused, the motion passes.
So that's approved with the modification. Please continue to work with the staff on that.
Thank you very much for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we will take a 30-minute recess now for lunch. We will return at 1 o'clock. So I will ask all members of the public to exit the meeting at this time and rejoin the meeting